Aloha. I'm Representative Cynthia Thielen, speaking to you from the Capitol today, and I'm just delighted that I have Robert Harris from Sierra Club with me today to be able to talk about some very serious subjects, right, Robert?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we are both experiencing a situation where a lot of bad, I say bad environmental bills, should say bills that are bad for the environment, are making their way through the legislature. And I think maybe let's start with the individual ones and then go to the bill where everything bad seems to be hung on it. So maybe talk about the environmental review process and the measures that are trying to exempt projects from that environmental review.
Absolutely. I think this year in particular, we've seen the environment be squarely under attack, where in the past sometimes people will attempt to maybe cut a corner here or there. This time they're really looking at how do we eliminate some of these different protections. And ultimately, this is going to be bad for Hawaii. Environmental review, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, sometimes we get caught in language that other people don't understand. Environmental review is the process by which we look at a project and try and look at what the potential problems are going to come up and attempt to deal with them before you start the project. From a developer's perspective, it makes sense because you don't want to be halfway through a development and then have to stop everything and start trying to readjust.
That's such an important point because it's a knee-jerk reaction of the building and construction industries to say, oh yes, let's just eliminate the environmental review. But actually it helps projects get better and it stops the legal challenges. Then they don't get the lawsuits when they do it properly.
And I think it goes even beyond that, right? I mean, for example, we recently had an experience with a church right down the road where they were exempted from having to do a cultural review, and lo and behold, they started digging up approximately 300 different bodies.
Oh, wow.
And immediately they had to stop. It was bad publicity for them. I mean, it created a black eye for the project. It looked insensitive, it looked inappropriate, and if they had simply done the analysis beforehand, they might have been able to identify that there were bodies located where they want to build, and they could have looked at going elsewhere or handling it in a much more open and public fashion. And that would have been a better project. So, I mean, even regardless of the legal challenges, I think catching problems before they occur just makes sense. And particularly when you start talking about developing near the coastline or near areas that are just sensitive and you can't fix after you do something wrong, it just makes sense to measure twice before you cut. So for example, one of the bills that was moving was not heard in the Senate. Now it's being brought back in the House. Is now attached to this omnibus, Senate Bill 755, which sort of includes a lot of different things in it. But one of the things really deals with environmental review. And it allows now the governor to exempt projects that he or she believes will have little or no impact on the environment. Now, let's back up a second. Let's not lose sight of what environmental review is. Environmental review, usually the first step is you do what's called an environmental assessment. And it's supposed to be sort of the quick, check just to make sure, is this project potentially going to have problems or not? If you determine there aren't, usually they'll issue something called a finding of no significant impact and say, okay, the FONSI, yes,
FONSI.
And go forth. If they do say, hey, we may have an environmental impact, then you go to the next step, which is the environmental impact statement, and that's sort of a much more comprehensive review. Through both these processes, the public has an opportunity to ask questions, and the person writing the document is supposed to respond back and say, well, we looked at that, or we didn't look at that, and here's why. And so it's sort of a ability to have a smart intellectual conversation. Very specific deadlines by which they have to move through, and once you've gone through this process, the document's either accepted or rejected, and 99% of the time it's just accepted, and then the decision makers have this document in front of them, and they can kind of say, okay, we think you should build here, not here, kind of make that kind of a rationale logic. And let's say, for instance, you're going to kill potentially 10 endangered species. Well, we want you to plant those 12 endangered species over here. so we have a net increase. Like you can kind of do that kind of mitigation.
It's a cooperative process, really. That's what, in some ways, with the administration and some leadership members pushing these exemptions through, they're really misunderstanding the process, because the environmental review allows everyone, including the developer, whether it's state, county, or private developer, they all can cooperate as they look at better ways to do what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important too, because let's be frank, we've all been in the DMV, we've all been in sort of bad bureaucratic situations, and nobody really wants to create unnecessary red tape. And so I think we have to be clear, the way the environmental review was designed is the kind of Menini projects, the small projects, the everyday kinds of things. Like if you're going to buy a box of paper clips, for example, that's not supposed to go through an environmental review. The small things, we've created a system by which the Environmental Council, which is a group of experts, creates an exemption lists for each agency. And so like the Department of Transportation can say, well, look, here's the kinds of things we do that aren't going to have any environmental impact.
Well, but there's the problem, because the Department of Transportation just has not gone in to ask for this categorical exemption list.
Yeah.
And they should be doing that. I used to serve on the Environmental Council many, many years ago, and it is a very dedicated, it was then and it still is today, a very dedicated group of people that have knowledge from different areas. It's quite a variety, and they're ready. There's no wait list. The Department of Transportation could list the types of things they feel should be exempted from any environmental review, such as driveways going into a place where it's not going to create any difficulty for the environment, and they could go in there and ask for that, and it would be reviewed and most likely granted. But they haven't, and then they keep coming to the legislature to say, pass a law exempting us. But they should be doing their homework, and they should be doing their own work.
Yeah, and I think the troubling thing about doing it at the legislature or otherwise is usually like the exemption lists are sort of, we put them out a lot, or we allow them to be used a lot, because the idea is we don't want every project doing an environmental review. We want the big projects to do them, and the small things, go ahead. But the catch-all is that there is somebody who's actually physically picking up that document and kind of looking at it and saying, okay, let me try to figure out if there's going to be an impact or not here with this project, this project, this project. And so there's a little bit of a catch there, a check and a balance. And the concern is when you statutorily say these projects will never need environmental review, that check and balance is gone.
Yeah, it is. It is.
755, one of the most alarming things.
Okay, now we've got to stop right there. Sure. 755, Senate Bill. 755 is the relating to economic development, but the title should be relating to environmental disaster, because it is that. Yeah. To say that economic development means that you ignore the environment is just flatly wrong.
Yeah.
So 755 is the omnibus bill for all of the bad bills that are going to gut the environmental process. So maybe go down through a laundry list of those.
Well, sure. Before we lose the environmental review, just to catch that,
sure.
and then I'll go through some of the other parts of it. It expressly states that the governor now has the ability to create exemption lists. So no longer, well, in addition to the Environmental Council. So if the governor were to decide, for example, if the rail project was a net positive benefit to the environment, he or she could add it to this exemption list and allow that project to go forward. Now, the key part is normally, if somebody believes it's a violation of law, it is going to have a significant environmental impact, they could go to court and say, you've got to stop. Senate Bill 755 explicitly does not include that line. So the only people that have the power to challenge it are the Office of Environmental Quality Control, which is an arm of the governor, so it's highly unlikely they'd ever file suit against the governor or have the authority to do so. The Environmental Council, which is a group of volunteers with no funding and no attorney assigned to represent them, or the agency, that it was in charge of approving it. So I mean, basically, you're saying the only people who can challenge are 3 people or 3 organizations that never will challenge, and nobody else can. So essentially, the way we read it is the governor has got carte blanche to take projects out of the environmental review process.
And the governor has some specific projects that this present governor wants to move forward come hell or high water.
Well, I think, you know, regardless of what projects, you know, again, I sort of always treat it, you know, not necessarily this individual governor, but the next one and the next one and the next one. You know, the problem is I don't think the governor wants to be in the position of being attacked by everybody who has concerns about the project to say, why didn't I have a chance to give my mana'o, to share my thoughts, have my questions answered, to really look at what the impacts are. And then when every single problem occurs, you know, the person ultimately who's going to now be responsible for it will be the governor. And I don't think any governor wants to be in that position in particular.
No.
So it just doesn't make sense.
But the bill is moving.
It is moving. My suspicion is it's something that they hope to get to conference committee and to see what they can trade. And unfortunately, it's you don't want to see that type of shenanigans going on where, you know, sort of you want something good for the environment, then you've got to trade off something bad, and just, you know, that nothing ever good comes out of that kind of back and forth.
Well, one of the things that concerns me for representing the windward side, there's a measure that is talking about exempting projects from all county planning. And this would be the general plan and your zoning, actually, to develop transit centers and bus centers that would maybe tie in later with the transit center. For the windward side, this could mean take away all of the zoning and all of the general plan, all of our local planning that's been done, get rid of any height limitation, any density limitation, all the rest of it, and be able to go ahead with these so-called transit centers. That could be devastating to the planning for I say Kailua, it could be devastating for any of our areas where people have really worked together to put sensible land use processes in place.
I think you have good cause to be concerned. There is a bus transit center specified in both Waimanalo and Kailua.
I know.
And basically this bill, I mean, the one catch to it is it says the county still has to go forth and do more. It doesn't automatically create it, but the county still has the ability to say, well, never mind, we don't want to do that. Which is an improvement. It used to be automatically a quarter mile around a bus transit center and a half mile around a rail transit center, just, you know, no planning, no zone, just go forth and build. Fundamentally, I think as an environmental organization, the Sierra Club would like to see urban infill. We'd like to see, you know, bigger, taller, you know, more dense construction rather than sort of just sprawl endlessly. But it has to be done in a way that the community is engaged,
Oh, absolutely.
that people approve it. And the concern about this type of legislation is that it really says the public can't be involved. We can't trust them to be involved in it. We're just going to go ahead and automatically do it. Gosh
Well,
darn
and
it.
the thing that is so disturbing about this, it just ignored any neighborhood board process. It ignored any community groups that have been involved. Hawaii's Thousand Friends is a wonderful organization. They've been very involved in all of the land use issues, but they're just set on the side as this state bill starts marching through to say, we're going to have these transit centers, and we're going to ignore all of the other restrictions. We don't want to be restricted. We want to do what we want. And
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. In the period of time I've been in the legislature, I haven't seen measures like this that are just arrogant. And I guess that's the best word to say. They're just arrogant to say that state government knows better what should happen and we're going to go ahead and do it.
I think you're right. You know, let's look at two projects. I think just the success and failure in Hawaii. I like to point to the Kahiava wind farm on Maui as this great example of a developer that went out to the community, engaged the community, heard their concerns, made changes in the project, and built these large windmills that, you know, virtually anyone who flies into Maui is going to see. They're significant. And when they went for their public approval hearing as part of the process, they had near unanimous support. And so it really demonstrated the public understood the project, rallied behind it, and supported it, and said this is a good project. And terrific. I mean, that's what a developer should do, and that's the way you build that kind of consensus and community support. You could take another project, like, say, for instance, the super ferry, where the concerns that arose were that we didn't go through the environmental review process, and I think regardless of all the legality, or regardless whether or not you wanted the super ferry or not, the people on Kauai that were on surfboards, I think a big part of that had to do with the fact that their voice was never heard. That they didn't have a chance to say, I want my concerns to be addressed.
Those developers of the super ferry came over and at the very beginning held sort of just a little meet and greet kind of event. And I can remember going over and talking to them and saying, you all need to do an environmental assessment and maybe an EIS, depending upon what the EA determines. And they were just shaking their heads, no, we don't, no, we don't. And I said, you're going to be stopped. You need to do that. You don't come into town and think you're going to do a project of this magnitude without having an environmental review. And that's basically what happened to them. They were stopped. And they could have done it in the way that was proper, maybe made adjustments, done things that maybe at certain times of the year they didn't use certain routing, but they didn't do it.
Yes, and I think my fear with these kinds of bills that we see going forward is that they haven't learned from those mistakes in the past, that you can't shove projects down the community's throat. People just instinctively, even if they like the project, don't like being told what to do. And I think the fear would be is, you can imagine if all zoning, planning, everything kind of go away in Kailua, you imagine a strip club appearing. Imagine, noise violations. Imagine a high-rise blocking someone's view. People just aren't going to sit around and accept that. And if you want the spark that's going to get people heavily involved in politics, well, this is a good way to do it. And
True. True. Because it's probably the most confrontative way that this legislature has ever operated, to say we're going to shove these things through. We don't care what you're saying. We don't care that you're not going to have a voice in the future. These projects are going to go ahead no matter what. Some of them, the exemptions have a 5-year shelf life, but why would you not take care of the environment for 5 years and then have to clean up after the mess you've made? I think people are going to just basically be angry and fight back.
I agree, and I think when people say there's only a 5-year shelf life, it is so frustrating to hear that. I mean, if I put a wastewater infrastructure plant next to your house during those 5 years, I'm not going to take it out at the end of the 5 years. That wastewater plant is going to be operating, for the rest of our lives probably. And so the reality is that the bad projects are going to still be there. There's an example on Maui that somebody brought up in testimony, which I think is great, where there were community plans to rebuild a particular highway, and they wanted to bring that highway more Mauka. And they were going to basically leave the beach alone, sort of give the beach a buffer area. And then after the tsunami came through, DOT declared an emergency, or essentially said we're just going to go forward, and they just went ahead and built a straight shot through, and then armored the highway. And we had just an excellent expert from Maui to come over with a picture showing what happened. And because DOT didn't go Mauka, they just zipped their project through using the guise of emergency. Now the beach is being destroyed. And Maui, was a heavily used beach for Maui. And I think, we have lots of examples of that kind of bad thing occurring. I mean, if you drive along the windward side of Oahu now, you see a number of the highways, all being heavily armored, and those beaches are disappearing. The reality is we have to plan for the future. We don't plan for just today. You don't say we just need to do these projects for jobs today. We have to build them for what the future of Hawaii is going to be.
Well, and that's what just troubles me so much, Robert, about the whole purpose behind all of this. It may be that, well, we want to have people working right today, but they can work more intelligently and greener by having the process followed instead of exempting everything. And I've never seen such an onslaught against the environment, and trying to poster it as the poster child for preventing projects from going ahead. And that's just not true. And it's not been, I don't think it's not fair and it's not true.
I think you're exactly right. I don't know what projects are being held up by environmental review. I mean, plainly, environmental review takes some time. I mean, nobody questions that. And again, we think that's a useful time period. But I'm not aware of any really unreasonable delays or problems. And if there were, I'd suspect it's because we're probably not funding these agencies.
Well, and
we
yes.
just came out of a massive budget crisis, and I
Yes.
recognize, legislators have a tough time. There's not a lot of dollars, and you have to make choices about where they go, and we get that. But when you have, large agencies that are really important that receive essentially no state money whatsoever and are completely federally funded, for whatever reason, you can't necessarily blame that agency for the fact that it takes a little bit longer for them to get through a permit because they don't have the staff, they don't have the time. And if you really, really wanted to expedite, on two levels, if you want to expedite a project, you give them the resources to hire the people sufficient to run it. And the second thing, the fringe benefits, you just create another job. So, that's probably the healthier and better way to go forward.
I think so. And I really appreciate the Sierra Club's paper, printed on recycled paper, or newsletter. And this one is just great. It's bills to watch halfway through the 2012 legislative session. And it's really a helpful summary because you're putting out the ones that Sierra Club supports, and then we get into the measures Sierra Club opposes, and you give the rationale. Excuse me. So you really provide an educational benefit to the reader so they can take a look at these and be able to then contact legislators to say, okay, we've read about these, we either like it or we don't like it, and we want to weigh in with our opinion.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely why we do that. And I think you're familiar, we've been doing a Capital Watch program where we've been trying to get people who are interested in what happens in policy.
And that's internet.
That's internet
And
now.
I love it because it's immediate, and boom, out it goes with the information.
And the great thing is that we're really engaging volunteers to do it. So the idea is that volunteers are tracking these bills and sort of giving their thoughts, and they'll probably be the first to admit they're not always right, but the idea is they're trying to make sure people are aware of what's happening and communicating about it. And the hope is creating a community of people that are concerned about seeing good green legislation occur and hopefully stopping some of the bad legislation.
And you don't need to be a Sierra Club member to be able to get onto this because people are just sending it out to their lists, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, it's something we're proud of, and again, it's a fundamental belief that's what healthy democracy is about, is making sure people are aware what's happening, and shining the light of accountability and transparency when bad things occur. And so, it is it's an important thing to have happen, and we're happy to try and get the information out to everybody.
And then maybe the bottle bill, we should just say, because that has made it through, but it's now kind of in that gray area, which always scares me. So, I'm sorry, not bottle bill, the plastic bag ban. I threw you there.
I thought we passed
the plastic bag.
Yes.
So maybe just say a few comments about that before we go off the air.
Of course. I think this is a great piece of legislation. The idea is every time you go into a store...
Well, everyone wins on it, maybe, and explain that, including the stores and the shopper.
Sure. No, we don't realize it, but you pay for those bags. And so even if you're somebody who brings in a reusable bag, that there is a little added cost to your food purchases or items because you're paying for everybody else's bags. And roughly for paper bag, it's about 10 cents, and for a plastic bag, it's roughly a penny. But on average, each store is paying roughly $6,000 to $10,000 per month in bag costs. So the idea is, hey, if we can reduce these, we're creating less litter, less Opala going into our overcrowded landfills. You're helping save the store some money, and hopefully that's going to mean everybody else saves some money when they buy items. And the idea of this bill was to put a small fee on the bags, so you see the cost of those bags up front, and then use that money to help fund watershed protection, which right now Hawaii spends very little on. And long term, if you want clean drinking water, we're going to need to really protect these forests. And so it is really this great win-win-win where you're reducing the trash and litter, You're helping the stores out, because they don't want to pay for these items any more than anybody else does. And we're helping fund watersheds
And
for future generations.
Robert, give a list of the variety of people and entities that support this bill.
It's truly, it's hard to find a piece of legislation that gets this much support. We had everyone from Pacific Resource Partners, Castle and Cook Resorts, to Surfrider, Sierra Club,
and the grocers,
Safeway and Times. I mean, it's rare that you see the business community
pulling together with this,
and the environmental community and generally the public, in large, all sort of supporting the same bill. In fact, I don't recall any other bill that really has gotten this depth of support and, frankly, so little opposition.
Well, I'm getting just hundreds of emails in support from people all over the islands, and it's wonderful. And I bet that's part of this tree.
Yeah.
Sierra Club and others. I mean, everyone is out there saying this is the year to put this through, and I think we should. I'm hoping that would be one of the proud things to finish up with. I'm hoping that some of these environmentally disastrous bills don't make it through to the final days, because it's scary. It is absolutely scary what we're dealing with here at this onslaught against the environment. Your voices are important. I'm Representative Cynthia Thielen with Robert Harris, Director of the Sierra Club, speaking to you from the Capitol, and hoping that we will be able to preserve the environment this legislative session and stop these bad bills.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show
Thank
today.
you. Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate it. And with your